Serious, what's the creepiest most interesting solved mystery? There's a couple that come to mind for me. The 30-year cold case murder of Rena Mariqueen that was solved when a New York family found a 55-gallon drum in the crawl space of their basement that had been sitting there for years through many previous home awareness. The original Spider-Man murder. Pretty freaky if you think about it. Makes you want to double check your attic and basement often, just in case. This man snuck into a couple's house and lived in their attic for years in a tiny makeshift room with a full store. He would come out at night to eat. One evening the wife woke up to her husband being stabbed to death in the kitchen. Police were perplexed because there was no sign of breaking and entering or any other evidence at that. She lived in the home alone with this guy secretly living in the attic for about a year, but left the house abandoned after much heartbreak. A couple of the original detectives on the case just couldn't get the case off their mind, so they would drive by the abandoned house every so often just to see if they could come up with some new ideas on solving the case. One night on a random drive-by, they see a shadow of man in the upstairs attic window and quickly bust in to see what was going on. By a mere second, one of the cops catches a glimpse of his foot going up into this tiny trapdoor. When they push it open, they find this man living in a tiny makeshift room with newspaper clippings of the murder. He would eventually come clean and confess to the murder. The thought of someone living in your attic or basement secretly without you knowing gives me the heebie-jeebies. The Benjamin Kyle mystery. Benjamin Kyle was the alias chosen by an American man who has severe dissociative amnesia after he was found without clothing or identification and with injuries next to a dumpster behind a fast food restaurant in Georgia in 2004. As a result of his lack of personal memories, between 2004 and 2015, neither he nor the authorities were sure of his real identity or background, despite searches that used widespread television show-based publicity and various other methods. It was recently solved in 2015. It took 11 years, but they found out his true identity. In Pennsylvania there was an urban legend of a thing called the Green Man or Charlie No Face. For many years people would say they had seen this weird human-like creature wandering through the streets at night. It had no face and had green skin. After sighting became more and more common, some people started investigating. That was when they discovered Raymond Ray Robinson, the man behind the urban legend. Due to an accident with a power line, he became severely deformed. Because the way he looked, people would cause panic whatever place he'd go. His only choice was to walk at night. He was so scary that, more than one time, people tried to hit him with their cars, thinking they had found the famous monster Green Man. Sark his name and you will understand why people were scared of him. The disappearance of the Stardust. It's 1947, and aircraft manufacturers are in a race to profit from the post-war air travel market. Avro of England comes up with the Lancastrian, a passenger version of the famed Lancaster with the same four Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. On a scheduled flight from Buenos Aires to Santiago, Chile, the Lancastrian Stardust of British South American Airways takes off and begins its dead reckoning navigation. It will be many years before directional beacons, much less widespread airport radar or electronic positioning systems. The navigator must give the pilot a bearing and note the airspeed and time for the different legs of the flight, then calculate the distance covered. The Lancastrian has ample power to cross the Andes, and the flight has been done without incident many times. At the appropriate time, the navigator tells the pilot to begin his descent into Santiago. The crew waits to drop below the cloud in confidence that the airport lights will be visible somewhere below. The plane sends a Morse code message to the airport ending in the odd term STENDEC, and then simply vanishes. When search planes find no trace of the plane, crew, and 6 passengers, the disappearance is reluctantly consigned to the annals of unsolved mysteries. People jump on the story with multiple theories of what the strange message meant, and speculate on sabotage, political intrigue, and even alien abduction. In reality, there are no explanations, and so it remains for 50 years. In 1998, 2 Argentine climbers have reached the foot of the glacier on Mount Tupungato, 50 miles east of Santiago. They spot a strange form which turns out to be a battered aircraft engine. There are also pieces of twisted metal and ripped clothing. Stardust has been found. A subsequent military expedition discovers other engines, wheels, propellers, and human remains. By now, a phenomenon that was virtually unknown in 1947 is understood and well plotted on a daily basis, the jet stream. Aided by a study of the wreckage, it becomes apparent that the plane flew head-on into an own jet stream at the high altitude needed to cross the Andes. Its airspeed, as opposed to ground speed, had remained nominal, while it was in fact falling far below what was expected, and the plane was well short of its destination when the crew confidently began its descent. Stardust had apparently flown straight into the near vertical head of the glacier, causing an avalanche that instantly hid it from searchers. Over the course of 50 years, the mangled wreckage, crew, and passengers became part of the glacier, slowly traveling to its foot to await discovery. As for the strange broadcast, many solutions have been forwarded, but Stendek remains a mystery. I saw this story on TV, probably on Forensic Files. It was a case of double murder, I believe, with the wife dead and the husband severely beat. At some point hours later the husband wakes up, but he's all beaten, and may have had massive head trauma. Anyway, his body is on autopilot, so he gets up and goes to get the paper off the lawn, brings it back inside, then dies. It's so disturbing to me. The Drive. Bogle and Mrs. Chandler mystery. Their bodies were found on New Year's Day, 1963 by an empty riverbank in Sydney. I don't think they could find the cause of death at the time, and it was very suspicious with their half-naked bodies covered with cardboard. Plus both were married, but not to each other, and had left an party together earlier that night, so jealous revenge theories abounded. Turns out it was carbon monoxide poisoning escaping from the dry riverbed which had dissipated by the time police arrived the next day. Dr. Harold Shipman, a family general practitioner that made unsolicited house calls on his patients, some with no physical ailments. He would murder them, alter their medical records, then sign their death certificates stating natural causes, and organizing their cremation to cover his tracks. Charlie Brandt. He and his wife stayed at her niece's house in Orlando, Florida, because of Hurricane Ivan. 3 days later, Charlie is found hanging in the garage, his wife stabbed to death and the niece had been decapitated, and her heart removed. Very freaky story, with lots of twists. Turns out Charlie had murdered his 8-month pregnant mom, and attempted to kill his dad and sister as a child. Diaz could not figure WTF was wrong with him, or how to even label it. I believe he was 12 at the time. He served no jail time and his records were sealed. Another twist. He grew up to become a serial killer too, married and lived a semi-normal life with his wife, or so everyone thought, while apparently obsessing over his wife's niece. Think 48 Hours did an episode, and it can be found on YouTube. Here's an article from Snooze. Grinstead obsession. I've posted this before I think on the same question or similar. The Cleveland House of Horrors. 3 kidnapped girls found alive that were kidnapped after 10 years. I live in Ohio and 20 minutes from Cleveland. I was barely 14 when the first girl was abducted. Once the other 2 happened, more and more people became paranoid in the Cleveland area. I remember the day they were discovered. A friend and I were working out in a gym looking up at the TVs. Breaking news flashed on the TV saying the 3 girls were found, and could possibly be the same 3 that disappeared many years ago. When it was confirmed that they were the same 3, everyone in the gym started cheering and jumping up and down. It was a beautiful moment. The man who did this to them hung himself in prison. Coward. The Sailing Stone located in a remote area of California's Death Valley National Park. The heavy stones appear to move across the dried lake bed known as Racetrack Playa, leaving a trail behind them in the cracked mud. The rock's apparent movement has been blamed on everything from space aliens and magnetic fields to pranksters. But no one has actually seen the rocks move, which only adds to the mystery. Explanation. The main hypothesis was that when a small amount of water was on the surface of the ground, a sheet of ice would form, trapping the rocks. Wind would then move the whole thing, with the reduced friction allowing the rocks to travel along the muddy ground. This idea had been theorized for a while, but it was confirmed in August 2014, after time-lapsed video footage showed the rocks moving during low wind speeds, across the thin, melting sheets of ice. Israel Keys. Just so different than any other serial killer that we know of. By hearing his methods, I just get the hunch that there's so much more that we don't know about what he did. How many buried backquote kill kits did we not uncover? It makes you think about the amount of serial killers that haven't been caught, who perhaps they've delighted in the random violence that aids their obscurity. Eek. Which makes me think of the Long Island Jilgo Beach serial killer. If that is the work of only one person, it's chilling. Because they dump bodies there even after authorities found other, older bodies. Same with the Highway of Tears in Canada. It just shocks you finding out about these things like you just fell through the ice into the water and you can't breathe. And it makes you wonder who the duck else out there could be doing this type of thing who does not have a set victim finding and a / dumping ground. I know it sounds so ducking stupid and maybe somewhat shallow. I dunno. But I'm so glad I have the other worries in life to take precedence in my mind when I wake up in the morning, so I don't go insane pondering about who out there will think I fit their victim mold and take me next. Edit. I had double words and phone typos I fixed. Wikipedia. Wiki Tara Grinstead murder case. Tara Grinstead, a former beauty queen and teacher who did not show up for class one morning. There were no signs of forced entry or sign of any kind of struggle. Over 10 years she was missing, and the case seemed to have gone cold. A podcast called Up and Vanished started doing a story on it. While they were still recording and making episodes of Up and Vanished, an arrest is made, and it is thought to be due in some part to the podcast. One former student had attempted to burglarize her home when he was discovered and strangled her. Another former student was then arrested as well with attempting to conceal the death. This one is not fully solved yet, as it is still in trial last I checked, but there is some rumors the boy who attempted to conceal the murder was the brains behind the operation. Great podcast and would highly recommend.